Hello, everyone. A few weeks ago, we had the president of. I'm going to start again. Hello, everybody. I'm going to start once more, Carolyn.
Yeah.
Carolyn. Here we go. Hello, everybody. A couple of weeks ago, we had the president of Brandeis University, Arthur Levine, on the show. He has a forward to an old book that he's updated, The Great Upheaval, about the uncertainty of higher education's future. And we're back on that subject today with my guest, Carolyn Levander, is a vice president for global strategy at Rice University. She's also a professor in the humanities, a professor of English, and she has an intriguing new book out. It's out at the beginning of November. It's called Invent Ed, How an American Tradition of Innovation Can Transform College Today. Carolyn is joining us from Santa Fe in New Mexico. Carolyn, congratulations on the imminent book.
Thank you so much. I'm really pleased to be here.
So this idea of an American tradition of innovation, some people associate colleges these days with rather stodgy conservatism. Why should we associate this American tradition of innovation with education? Is that true for the most part in the history of American further education, Carolyn?
Well, let me begin by saying that my answer to Arthur's book, or his question, is college worth it, is absolutely it's worth it if you know how to drive it right. And just as you buy a fancy car, you need to know how to use it. Same with the investment anyone makes in U.S. university education today. And so
I can't resist $320,000 college degree, really worth it. I'm not sure what $320,000 will buy you as a car, Carolyn, but I hope it would take you quickly, at least, and in luxury.
Well, I don't know where that 320 comes from. I don't know, and I, don't want to drill down on its numbers. Of course, universities have student aid, and there's all kinds of ways that students are getting scholarships, et cetera. So regardless of all of that, the fact of the matter is that if you know how to use a university wisely and correctly, it is the engine for your life in the workplace. And so it's really important for everyone who's going to college, who's teaching in a college, who is sending a student to college, to understand how to get the most out of college today. And Invent Ed traces a long history of invention in the United States, threads it through the history of U.S. education, and argues that it is that legacy that every student can uncover for themselves as they spend however many years getting an education today.
It's interesting that you talk about it as an investment in the workplace. You, as I said, you're a professor in the humanities, a professor of English. You've written a number of books, mostly about literature. I'm assuming that for you, it's more than just a utility university. You don't just go to equip yourself to get a good job, a high-paying job. You go to make yourself more human. I mean, you're a professor in the humanities, whatever that word means. So there is a human quality as well to the university experience.
Oh, absolutely. And this is the magic of an education, is that actually in untapping your creative capability, and Invent Ed provides very practical ways that every student can navigate that process for themselves. In the process of doing that, you not only awaken your curiosity, but you channel it and direct it not only into like joining a workforce as we see it today, but transforming that workforce. I mean, let's face it, right? It was Steve Jobs sitting in a calligraphy class at Reed that he cited as the creative genesis for his major tech transformation. So we know the serendipity of creativity in universities is palpable, is ever present. It just really hasn't been something that universities have strategically solved for, particularly at the undergraduate level.
It's interesting you bring up the Jobs example. As you note, he did a calligraphy class. I'm not sure if he was actually enrolled at Reed. Maybe he was half enrolled. And as soon as he figured that out. He left the university and, of course, came back down to San Francisco and co-founded Apple. Same is true of Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, all college dropouts. Peter Thiel, of course, has a history of even paying smart students to leave universities. So is the Jobs model a good one? The Steve Jobs model, that is, Carolyn, in terms of justifying college. When you're really innovative, you don't want to waste your time in it. Perhaps America's most influential innovator these days is Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI. He also is a college dropout. He dropped out of Stanford.
Yeah, no, and look, dropout culture, there's a glamour about it, right? For sure. And while it is successful for some of these really wonderfully creative minds that have been tremendously transformative in various marketplaces, to really scale that kind of capacity across all of the students who are currently enrolled requires institutional intention. And so my question is, how do we create more Steve Jobses who actually find the university not a place to leave, but a place to continue to build creative capability, right? Creative muscle. And so to me, it's an example of the happenstance that occurs on our campuses. If universities really solve for that and take that as a provocation at the level of our curriculum and the environments we build, how many more Steve Jobs can we actually graduate and support over, long careers, transformative careers?
What's your analysis of the current historical moment, Carolyn? Arthur Levine sees it as an existential moment. That word often gets overused, probably particularly in universities these days. But he believes that this is the moment where universities need to profoundly reinvent themselves. Otherwise, they might indeed themselves become history. Would you agree with him?
So Invent Ed focuses on adaptation as a mechanism for survival, but also for thriving. Let's face it, our environments are always changing. The history of universities has been one of adaptation, whether it was around the founding of the National Science Foundation, the growth of a really profoundly robust research ecosystem in the late 20th century. It's a dynamic history. It's not that colleges are static. In fact, Invent Ed begins with a very simple question. Are we a museum or are we a startup? Right? We think about museums as the places, you mentioned stodgy conservatism earlier. Museums are the places where the accumulated wisdom is handed down, curated carefully and handed down for educational purposes to a public, to a student body who needs to learn. A startup is a messy hack space, right? It's high risk, high reward, it's run fast and break things, it's building new knowledge, and it's messy. And so where should universities be on that continuum? Invent Ed argues that they need to be in a very dynamic place and to be there intentionally. So I don't think that most universities have really asked the question the way that Invent Ed poses the question. I think it's a question not only for university leaders, but also for the public, for our government, for any student entering the university today. And I would also say, regardless of where a university might fall on that continuum, Invent Ed provides a very easy, straightforward user's guide to how every student can navigate the curriculum they've chosen successfully.
Yeah, maybe it should be called, rather than Invent Ed, Intent Ed.
Yeah.
I like the comparison with a museum. Do you want to be a museum or a startup? It kind of reminds me of America and Europe. America is a startup for all its messiness, and in Europe, much more conservative, is pleased with itself as a museum, although it also wants to be a startup, which it's struggling to do. Can one be both, a museum and a startup, Carolyn? Is it an either or?
No. Of course, we're all a bundle of both, right? But we need to see where we are on that continuum and place ourselves there intentionally. Maybe it pays to be more conservative in one domain, more inventive in another, more high risk taking. It's wonderful you mentioned Europe, because the first portion of Invent Ed charts a cultural history of invention in the United States, beginning with the colonies. And, Benjamin Franklin is a wonderful case in point of a quintessential American whose time in France in particular was all about performing a kind of American inventiveness for European audiences who had read about U.S. inventiveness in books and newspapers, but wanted to see the genuine article. And so it was his ability to perform a kind of inventiveness that really packaged American invention for global audiences.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about Franklin. One of the more influential libertarians in America is also a Franklin scholar, as well as a distant relative of Franklin. And he claims, we had him on the show, he claims Franklin is the greatest of all Americans. I have to admit, Carolyn, that I've had two kids go through college. So I wouldn't say I'm $640,000 out of pocket, but I certainly spent a lot of time on and money investing in both kids for college. They're entirely different kind of children. One is naturally extremely entrepreneurial, and one is naturally rather conservative and academic. Kids differ. It's just the nature of things. You can have a brother and sister who are completely different. So how does Invent Ed, or your idea of this future American university, which is more like a startup than a museum, how does it cater to more conservative kids who just don't have, for better or worse, an entrepreneurial bone, a startup bone in their body?
So that's a great question. And I don't know where your kids went to school, but,
well, one went to NYU and one went to Bryn Mawr. So
okay,
probably not that different from Rice in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been teaching for, over 2 decades, and what I see are students increasingly being risk averse. And coming into college, wanting to make good grades, wanting to take the courses that they feel confident will maximize their GPA, So I think students generally right now, from my perspective, and when I talk to colleagues at other universities, they say the same thing. There's a kind of risk aversion. And so for me, the question is, how do we as faculty build a growth mindset in our classes? How do we, through our pedagogy, regardless of the subject of the course, encourage students to understand that if they don't do well at the beginning, they can get better over time, right? That their mastery of a particular subject is more like a muscle that they can grow, as opposed to like their eye color that's, fated at birth. And I think building that, regardless of whether a student is more self-identified as entrepreneurial and risk-taking or more sort of conservative, is a powerful gift and capability to give a student when they go out into the work world, wherever they position themselves in the workforce, whether it's in a high-risk, high-reward industry or a more conservative industry, because with the capability to feel that you have a kind of creative capacity, wherever whether you're an accountant or a startup CEO, you will have the ability to problem solve in your chosen line of work, kind of more autonomously. And that is a very important thing that I think we really need to give every graduate student. It's a kind of confidence that stands the test of time. In my own life, it has stood me in the test of time. Yes, I'm an English professor. I started a company in the middle of COVID that I exited. I think we continue to take chances and ask questions like "what if" throughout our lives. And I had no formal training at the undergraduate level that would ever have equipped me to start a company.
It's really interesting, Carolyn, that you note the risk aversion of students. I couldn't agree more. And I think that's one of the cultural contradictions, that young people are increasingly conservative. But in terms of universities, I'm not so sure about you. Maybe you're not quite as risk averse as some of your colleagues. But isn't one of the problems with the university the tenure system, which means that most faculty are also quite risk averse? It's an incredibly conservative culture and environment. We did a show last month with a professor from Emory who argued in favor of tenure. I thought it was an absurd argument. I tried to be polite, but I couldn't disagree with her more. What's your position on shaking the university up, of perhaps getting rid of tenure and making sure that the risk aversion, which is a more maybe broadly cultural phenomenon amongst younger people, is not mirrored amongst its faculty.
Yeah, no, I mean, Andrew, another fantastic observation. And what I would say is, look, yeah, I've been up through the ranks, and regardless of the discipline, when you're a PhD student, it's all about being the most brilliant. It's all about not being the slowest antelope, right? And so you drill down on
Well, I'm not sure it's brilliance. I think it's perhaps the reverse. It's being the most orthodox. Isn't that one of the problems with the PhD system?
It's disciplinary rigor within the guardrails that the generation older than you has created, right? And that's how you get published. That's how you get the first academic job to begin with. And so in that ecosystem, brilliance takes on a certain set of characteristics. Now, I think that when faculty start becoming teachers themselves, unconsciously they carry that set of behaviors with them, right? And how do you assess, smart versus less smart in a classroom? Through the ways you've learned your professors did when you were in school yourselves. And so I think even unwittingly, we carry forward an unfortunate rigidity in how we think about, creativity and learning. And of course, the whole tenure process is about research outcomes that are credentialed by the leaders in your field. And so to the extent that you want to get tenure and you want to get promoted, you continue to produce a certain kind of research. And so I think it's no one person's fault or any part of the funnel's fault, but I think it's an environment that understands disciplinary rigor in a certain way. And let's face it, we do need to have knowledge to make breakthroughs. Like, people actually do need to have mastery in order to invent new things. So it's not that you want to get rid of that, but you need to couple it with a mindset that is supportive of failure, of risk taking, and that lets students off the hook from feeling like they have to have the highest GPA possible.
Easier said, I fear, than done. Invent Ed, how an American tradition of innovation can transform college today. Most of our audience will probably skew to the progressive end, probably not a lot of great fans of MAGA or Trump watching this. But of course, their critique of higher ed, Carolyn, as you know, certainly better than me, is that there's very little invention. It's all dogma. It's all progressive left-wing stuff, feminism, anti-colonialism. They use the W word, woke. Is there any truth to that? Do you address that in Invent Ed? It seems as if it's quite tough to be a conservative, particularly in the humanities in the American university.
Yeah, I mean, Invent Ed tells everyone that, like, we're in the wrong fight, right? So just cut it out, take a time out, and let's frame the challenge and the problem correctly. So Invent Ed shows that we have a remarkable wealth of inventive history in our country over centuries, that the US educational system has historically been a place of fomenting industry transforming discoveries. And there's a very, strong data set that supports that, particularly in the mid 20th century, late 20th century, and today. So universities are the places, particularly at the faculty level and the graduate student level, where new inventions emerge, industry creating inventions, patent producing inventions, national economy, enlivening inventions. And so I think what we really need to focus on when we talk about the undergraduate education, which is really where the conversation seems to be focused in the comments you just made, in terms of the critique, is regardless of what anyone thinks about any kind of disciplines, we know that disciplinary diversity is important to the knowledge economy, right? So just as biodiversity is important to the biological health of our world and our planet, so too is disciplinary diversity. All of the disciplines in all of their myriad forms is a compilation of knowledge as we have built it over centuries. And so whether you agree or not with any particular, segment of that knowledge, we have to be on the side of maintaining disciplinary diversity, because that is the resource upon which new inventions are created. So case in point, yes, of course, jobs in the calligraphy class is a case in point. Another case in point, is the pioneer investor Bill Miller, who was actually sitting in a graduate seminar in a Hopkins philosophy grad program on John Searle, who kind of had a breakthrough moment when he was deep in the world of brute facts. And, his breakthrough moment was he suddenly saw the inventive potential of Bitcoin. And so we don't know where inventive breakthrough will happen. We can't curate where it will happen. What we need to do as universities, as national governments, as the public, is commit to a university education that builds the mindset that allows for us to have more Bill Millers, more Steve Jobs in the world. And we just need to do that. And we can't do that by closing departments and eating our seed corn. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't know who Bill Miller is. Did he invent Are you suggesting he invented Bitcoin?
He did not invent Bitcoin, but he was one of the pioneer investors who saw its full potential.
It's interesting that he was in a John Searle class. John Searle recently died. Another controversial figure, got half thrown out of Berkeley for his keenness on some of his female students and associates. I'm not sure what John Searle would have thought of Bitcoin. My guess is he wouldn't have thought very much of it.
That's right. And my point is, creative breakthrough is agnostic, right? So
but I mean, how do you distinguish between creative breakthrough and scam?
Well,
Carolyn.
yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people who would argue that Bitcoin is just a scam.
Well, yeah, and
it's just a Ponzi scheme.
Well, and InventEd does not comment on invention and how we create an ethical ecosystem around it, though InventEd does point out that, of course, invention culture itself is, rife with, with critiques, and understandably so. So really, the point of InventEd is to ensure that every student who goes to university walks in alert to what that student needs in order to be successful, not just to get a degree, not just to have A's on a transcript, but to be successful in the world as that student wants to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, having sent 2 kids through college and having a lot of my friends' kids go to college, I don't quite know how that works. I think it's incredibly difficult, even however much you're paying. What about, I want to come to AI in a few minutes, but what about the internet itself? A lot of people believed when the internet was invented that it would mark the demise of the university, the physical university, because now you could have famous professors, John Searle's now broadcasting their lectures, their wisdom all over the world. What does InventEd suggest about the physical university? Lots of debate about whether there's any value in actually spending 4 years on a campus, whether it's Rice or NYU or Princeton or Stanford. What's your take in InventEd on the value of the physical experience?
So I think the physical experience is what you make it. So my position on technological innovations is to remind us all that as technology is transforming universities, but universities are generating the kind of technological inventions that are transforming many industries, right? So it's not that universities are a static group of institutions, a static industry that are being impacted, but they're also generating tech breakthroughs. And there's many examples of this. And I think it's regardless of what kind of university you teach at, it's a very exciting time in terms of pedagogical innovation and leveraging new tech tools to create more personalized learning in your classroom.
So yes to the campus, Carolyn.
Uh, well, it's so
It's
interesting
either
to
yes
me.
or no, and there's no third
No, it's
answer.
not. No, it's not yes, no. Where is a campus? The original definition of a university is that it is where scholars and students convene to in the name of knowledge. We now have new technologies that allow us to do it, from our dorm rooms, from our homes. So to me, the university is a hybrid, really kind of dynamic space. It might have a street address. That street address might include your house. It might include, the local WeWork or Starbucks or wherever you go to learn and take classes. You may do it asynchronously, you may do it synchronously. So to me, it's a very exciting time for the industry. And in that way, it's not all that different from other industries that are leveraging tech tools, to make more robust businesses.
Well, speaking of innovation, I know that you at Rice, and you're associated with this, will be one of the first to offer a dedicated undergraduate degree in AI. As I said, you've been associated with this. What's your take on AI? Obviously, we are living in an AI-obsessed world this week. Everyone seems to be talking about whether the boom is sustainable, whether it's going to lead to the collapse of the world economy. Many people believe that AI offers, again, an existential threat to universities, that we might replace the Carolyn Levanders of the world with smart machines. Why are you offering a major in AI at Rice? What will people actually study?
Yeah, one of the things that makes me really most happy to be in a university is the insatiable curiosity of faculty to play with new tools and to bring those new tools into the learning experience for students. And so that is, kind of leaning on the side of innovation and startup, right? Even in the more traditional classrooms, as you might imagine them. And so, look, in 2012, US higher ed was similarly aflutter that, the year of the MOOC, it was announced as the year of the MOOC, the massive open online course that had been generated by, new digital platform technologies coming out of Stanford, coming out of MIT and other institutions, that the MOOC would destroy US universities as we understood them, right? That it was the disruptive black swan event that would take us all out. And here we are 13 years later. And, what we see is actually that digital technologies have been integrated into university education, I would argue more often than not, to make it a better experience for students. And I would therefore predict that AI will have a similar kind of, multi-decade effect within universities. So I am not teaching courses in the engineering school and the AI program, so I can't speak, with competence and in detail about what those courses will include or not include. But one thing you do know is that those courses and students getting that major will be taking general distribution requirements, fulfilling an undergraduate degree that requires that they take courses in a range of other disciplines across the university, so that those students will be learning what you might argue are, more in the startup environment within the context of, disciplines they may have never even heard of before, or taken a class in before. And to me, that's a very important piece of the puzzle.
Will there be smart machines teaching this?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends what you mean by a smart machine. So I'm thinking
Well,
about.
can you imagine, for example, an algorithm replacing yourself or one of your colleagues?
I can imagine algorithms making my teaching experience so much better. I can imagine, one of the inventions that has come out of Rice is OpenStax College, and it's an open education resource, highly curated intro college textbooks that are now being supplemented with machine learning, personalized learning capabilities. So for me, as a faculty member, being able to understand where my students are getting confused and aren't answering questions correctly helps me personalize my interaction with them to ensure that they get over that learning impasse. And so to me, I see it as a powerful supplement.
What do you make, Carolyn, of the current, what some people see as a war by the current American president administration on universities as we speak? Brown, I think it's the second university to reject the White House deal for special treatment. There was an interesting piece this week in The Atlantic suggesting that the logical endpoint of Trump's higher education agenda is devastating racial diversity at elite universities like Brown and Rice. What do you make of this assault? Is it ideological? Is it in the name of innovation, fairness? What's going on here?
You know, again, as I said earlier, it's really important, and InventEd does really emphasize this, that we focus on, you know, what are we trying to accomplish? We are trying to ensure that this country has the most dynamic and innovative economy in the world. And historically, we have been a leader in innovation and new technologies, and that has been remarkably important for our national vitality and wealth. And it is also the case that historically and today, universities are the incubators for those industry creating discoveries. And so if we believe that we want this country to have a thriving economy and to be the center of an innovative ecosystem, we have to invest in universities in a way that supports that.
You seem quite negotiable on lots of fronts, Carolyn, but the one thing you're non-negotiable about is foreign students. You gave an interesting interview talking about your non-negotiability when it comes to your Indian students at Rice. I know that Rice is particularly proud of growing Indian students by up to 60%. Is this an area that you feel particularly strongly about when it comes to InventEd? Are we talking, is an American university really a global university, or should it be an American ed university, or should we not even be using those kinds of titles?
You know, it's interesting, as the book shows, you know, in the 19th century, of course, Europe was the global leader in higher education, and, you know, US citizens who wanted to become university professors went and studied in Germany, in England, in France, and then returned to the US and built the universities that we have today. And so, you know, there's a history of our American universities learning from, you know, the world's best institutions and innovating accordingly. And the end result of that is that US universities have historically been the globally dominant player in the higher ed industry. And so it makes sense that faculty from around the world, students from around the world want US education. It's a sign of our country's national vitality. So I wouldn't say American or global. American universities have been global from the start, and we need to remember that. So this is just a more recent chapter in, you know, what has been an international endeavor for centuries. Now, India is a very interesting country for U.S. And all universities to look to further the impact of our educational mission. The need for top quality education is remarkably high there. The student demographics are kind of breathtaking. And so it makes sense that any educational university would be committed to extending their impact, you know, to Indian students and faculty.
Yeah, Indian students, though, maybe they're the apple pie. What about Chinese students? I'm sure you have quite a lot of Chinese students at Rice. I know they dominate a lot of the top Ivy League schools. And given that conservatives or China hawks suggest that these kids are coming to American universities, learning to innovate, and then going back to China and using that innovation to take on the American economy, do you think there needs to be, in the future of American education, a little bit more care in terms of allowing students from hostile countries like China, or at least hostile to the United States, to study at universities, particularly when it comes to important innovation, AI, military technology?
Yeah, no, that's right. And look, there are guardrails in place, and U.S. universities work hand in glove with the U.S. government to ensure best practices. So that's in place. And I think what the book shows is that you get the best inventions out of embracing diverse points of view. And so within um, you know reliable and thorough vetting systems, anytime you include students from very different cultural backgrounds, you get more diverse perspectives in the room, and that's where creativity and invention really happen. We know, right, that Ben Franklin, who I talked about earlier, was one of these early problem solvers that just put a lot of different tools into new combinations. In fact, that is the definition of creativity that has really, I think, been a through line in US invention culture. And so it makes perfect sense to have diverse perspectives in the room.
Yeah, it's interesting with Franklin. I mean, I know he studied in the US, whether the British would have allowed him to study, given that he was important in the independence movement. Should we be feeling sorry, Carolyn, for universities? There was a FT headline earlier that Harvard has suffered $113 million loss. I guess those are university numbers, but there was also a New York Times piece suggesting that Harvard's wealth is growing despite the current attacks on its funds. These universities are enormously wealthy. I mean, especially the top ones like Harvard and Yale and Princeton and Rice. You guys aren't starving. We shouldn't really be worrying about you, should we?
We should be feeling sorry not for Harvard, but for our country. And we should be feeling sorry for our country because the research funds that are no longer fueling scientific discovery and invention in our most powerful laboratories will have a serious downstream effect on our national economy. So that's where we should be feeling sorry. I think, again, it's a red herring to feel sorry for universities, whether they're rich, poor, or in between, when they don't get research dollars for really important work, research work that's going on. Areas. And so we really do need to focus on the outputs of that research rather than the labs that produce it.
Finally, Carolyn, a couple of years ago, I visited the University of Austin in Austin, Texas. It's designed as a rather conservative but innovative university. I was intrigued with what they were doing there. Do we want to end, given your focus on invention, do we want to end with your best example of an innovative college or an initiative within higher education that for you is the model?
So I'm a big supporter of new institutions that are focused on invention and innovation from the start. And yes, I mean, it's wonderful. And there have been other wonderful efforts in the last decade. I think here of Minerva University out of Northern California that truly has a international.
Yeah, I know the CEO there. So you're an admirer of initiatives like Minerva and the University of Austin.
I mean, I am. And Southern Arizona State. I mean, these are institutions saying, hey, we're going to
go on, Karen.
Yeah. No, these are institutions that have the courage of the conviction to do it differently. There's many ways to learn in this country, many ways to learn.
Well, that's what the heart of your new book is, Invent Ed, How an American Tradition of Innovation Can Transform College Today. Carolyn Levander, thank you so much for such a wise take on the future of education. Really nice to have you on the show.